They laughed at her in the briefing room, but 12 hours later, Israel's survival rested on her alone. They called her a technician, a paper soldier, a waste of a flight seat. But when the world stood on the brink of a nuclear firestorm, she was the only one who saw it coming, and she didn't ask for permission. She just stopped it. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about how the quietest person in the room can rewrite the fate of a nation. If that already hit you, pause for a second. Comment down below what you would have done in her place. Share this video if you believe silent warriors deserve to be seen, and subscribe to Veteran Biker now for raw, untold stories of grit, justice, and tactical redemption. We want to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We read every single one. And don't forget, tomorrow we've got another story you won't believe is true. Set your reminder, it's coming. This is Veteran Biker. Let's ride. The tarmac of Al Udeid Air Base shimmered under the late afternoon sun, waves of heat radiating from the concrete as the C-17 transport ramp hissed open. Major Aria Blake descended alone, boots striking the ground with a muted thud, duffel slung over one shoulder, orders in hand. The vast Qatari desert loomed beyond the perimeter fences, but all her focus was on the hardened hangars ahead, specifically Hangar 9B, where the elite B-2 unit was already preparing for a campaign that hadn't yet been acknowledged by any official source. Her first step on base didn't go unnoticed. 3 men leaning against a fuel truck broke into a smirk. One of them, wearing a flight suit unzipped to the waist and sunglasses pushed up over his forehead, chuckled. "Well, hell must be lost. That's not a Starbucks uniform, is it?" The others laughed, though it was the tired kind of laughter that came from boredom, not malice. Aria didn't break stride, didn't offer a retort. Her eyes flicked once toward the voice, then moved on. She passed the outer checkpoints with ease, her credentials already pre-cleared. The air had that tight metallic taste particular to military installations gearing up for something big: fuel, stress, and secrets. Inside the operations building, fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as voices echoed from briefing rooms and command terminals. A junior logistics officer offered to show her to the assignment desk, but she declined with a polite nod, already memorizing the base layout as she walked. Her feet carried her with silent precision. She didn't wander. She wasn't lost. Hook 1 came as she entered the restricted wing housing the B-2 Operations Briefing Center. A group of 5 officers, 2 pilots, a flight commander, and 2 weapons systems specialists looked up from a long table cluttered with data slates and aerial photos. One of them, a tall, square-jawed man with silver oak leaves on his lapel, stopped mid-sentence. "You're looking for admin, Mom?" "That's 2 buildings west," he said flatly, gesturing with a pen as if waving her away would solve whatever mistake had brought her here. Aria didn't stop. She stepped up to the access panel beside the blast door, tapped in her clearance code, and waited as the biometric scanner pulsed once, then turned green. The heavy door hissed open. Behind her, a pause stretched into silence. Inside, a wall-sized screen showed a live satellite feed of Iran's airspace. Red zones blinked across the Strait of Hormuz. A bevy of flight officers buzzed like hornets around secure terminals. No one looked up when she entered. No one greeted her. And that was fine. She found the temporary workstation pre-assigned to her, logged in with encrypted credentials, and opened a slim black field notebook. Her handwriting was small and angular, almost cryptic, as she began copying a series of hand-drawn air corridors she'd memorized the night before. It looked like idle doodling. It wasn't. Hook 2 followed fast. Through the glass pane that separated the ready room from the mission briefing bay, Captain Sean Maddox leaned in close to a group of younger aviators. He was animated, confident, the kind of leader who led not just with rank, but with swagger. "You see her?" he whispered, though not quietly enough. "That's Major Blake. Word is she's never flown in a B-2, probably came from some staff rotation at Langley or some damn PR office. Bet her combat records printed on cardstock." The group laughed. Maddox continued louder now. "They want her running electronic overwatch? I'd rather have a toaster plugged into the SAT feed." Aria didn't lift her head. Her pen paused for only a breath before continuing. Outside, the noise of a departing F-15E cracked across the base, a sonic punctuation mark to Maddox's punchline. But within the confines of the room, Aria's silence said more than any rebuttal could. She wasn't here to argue, she was here to observe. And what she saw, she catalogued, precisely, thoroughly, relentlessly. They saw a quiet woman who didn't belong. She saw patterns in the way they spoke. She heard where their loyalties aligned. She noted who laughed, who watched silently, who parroted Maddox and who didn't. She marked the officers who ran simulations sloppily, who double-checked comms encryption, who logged their flight hours truthfully, and who let them drift. And through it all, she remained exactly what they assumed she was, invisible, at least for now. The operations briefing room had no windows, no clocks, and no time. Just the persistent glow of monitors casting cold light on hardened faces. General Marcus Raines stood at the center of it all, tall and motionless, like a mountain carved in dress blues. The room fell silent the moment he entered. "You're not here to drop bombs," he began. "You're here to make sure the world doesn't burn." A single slide flicked onto the wall-sized screen. A high-altitude satellite image of Iran's interior, dozens of red markers clustered along railway lines and desert plateaus, possible mobile launch platforms. Israel's Mossad had intercepted chatter suggesting an imminent deployment of warheads acquired through back-channel dealings. None of it was public, all of it was dangerous. "This is Operation Sentinel Echo," Raines continued. "Officially, we're supporting Israeli airspace drills. Unofficially, we're to intercept and neutralize long-range payloads suspected to be in transfer through civilian concealed convoys. Stealth, coordination, and split-second data analysis will keep this from becoming the next global firestorm." The image shifted again to a flight map overlaid with call signs, patrol corridors, and timing intervals so precise they made the room collectively tense. The B-2 seconds would fly from Al Udeid under radio silence, dip through infrared windows in Iranian radar coverage, and release guided payloads within a 4-minute window before exfiltration. "Any mistake," Raines said, "and Tel Aviv becomes a crater." Maddox crossed his arms and leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. Around him, several pilots exchanged looks. "And our new addition?" he asked, voice light but pointed. Raines didn't flinch. "Major Aria Blake will handle electromagnetic threat mapping and mission intel sync across all flights. You'll route signal queries and countermeasure updates through her node." "Sir," Maddox said, tone sharpened, "she's not part of the 8th Bomber Wing. Most of us have logged over 3,000 flight hours in B-2 seconds. I'm just asking, has she even been inside one?" A few chuckles rippled around the room. Raines let them die out. "She's not here to fly," he replied. "She's here to ensure you make it back alive." No one laughed after that. Later that night, Aria sat alone in the auxiliary mission planning bay, the room dim except for a projection of overlapping infrared satellite scans. Her fingers danced across the console, assembling flight windows, aligning them with Elint intercepts from the Mediterranean and eastern Turkey. She had 3 hours before her next systems check, and she wasn't going to waste a second. The door slid open behind her. Maya Chen, a young signals officer assigned to her for the operation, hovered awkwardly in the threshold. "Ma'am?" I was told to help calibrate threat vectors with you. Aria nodded once. Come in. Start with the East Corridor pings. We're going to trace the anomalies from the Jordanian feed. As Chen stepped inside, she paused at the holographic projection, suspended in blue, layered with movement and complexity. I've never seen them mapped this way before, she whispered. How did you... I don't use the Navy's threat templates, Aria replied calmly. They're 2 days outdated. Chen hesitated. Where did you learn this method? Aria glanced at her. Places they don't list in training manuals. Back in the primary war room, Maddox hovered over a screen, glancing at the latest mission sync update. The timing columns had been color-coded, an adjustment he hadn't requested. He tapped through the modifications, brows tightening. The adjusted windows were tighter, riskier, but smarter. He didn't say a word, but for the first time that day he stopped smiling. Across the base, alone in a room filled with shadows and flickering light, Aria tapped the final key on her console. The new attack vectors were uploaded, synced, and quietly approved by Central Command, without ever passing through the usual chains. She closed her eyes for a moment and whispered, more to herself than anyone else. They're not ready, but they will be. At 600 sharp, the base stirred to life. Steel doors hissed open, security checkpoints activated, and a wave of personnel began flooding the command compound. The heat hadn't yet settled in for the day, but tension already baked the air. Inside the Joint Tactical Planning Room, another high-level briefing was underway, this time limited to mission crew and squadron leaders. Aria stood at the perimeter of the room, not in the center where pilots clustered, but near the secondary data terminals, as if by design. Colonel Devon Sharp stood beside the main projection wall, arms folded, letting the image speak first. It was a rotating 3D rendering of Western Iran, stitched from satellite composites and hyperspectral imaging. Supply lines, comm nodes, and suspected mobile warhead convoys were tagged in a glowing red-orange hue that pulsed with unsettling regularity. This is our playing field, Sharp began. Iranian defense systems have shifted in recent weeks. SAM arrays near Esfahan have gone dark, either repositioned or replaced by decoys. Civilian rail convoys have increased. We believe that beneath the noise, something is being moved, and not just ammunition. He gestured toward a blinking corridor between Tabriz and the Syrian border. Intel indicates a likely transfer of classified targeting hardware, possibly of Israeli origin. Our job is to identify, isolate, and neutralize that shipment before it crosses into Hezbollah-controlled sectors. The room remained tense but engaged. No one joked here. No one had to... Sharp continued, Israel's not confirming or denying the tech is theirs, but they've requested we handle the strike, and they've given us a narrow corridor of cooperation. We get one shot, no signature, no escalation. Then came the lineup. Each B-2 will fly in staggered formation, spaced to exploit radar shadowing from terrain ridges. Each pair will be responsible for visual confirmation, intel uplink, and strike execution. Major Aria Blake will coordinate electromagnetic sync across all squadrons and validate strike confirmation via ELS data packets. Her node will sit between forward command and target verification. A beat, Maddox's hand shot up. With all due respect, Colonel, that's a critical position. We're trusting our signature confirmation to someone who hasn't flown with us, hasn't trained in the cockpit. Sharp didn't look at Aria when he answered. Major Blake comes highly cleared. That doesn't answer my question. A chuckle snuck out from one of the back rows. Captain Delgado, another pilot, leaned toward Maddox and muttered, I've got a cousin in cyber. Maybe I'll call him in to handle our next bomb run. Several nearby officers snorted. Still at the edge of the room, Aria remained silent. But her hands, resting calmly at her sides, had curled ever so slightly into fists. Aria didn't respond. She didn't need to. Not yet. Instead, she reached down to the slim black tablet secured to her thigh and brought up a live scan overlay. Her fingers moved fast, slicing through classified spectral layers of data from the last 30 to 6 hours. Dozens of data points glowed, faded, blinked, patterns invisible to anyone not trained to see through the noise. She tapped a final command. On the main screen, without asking permission, a new layer appeared, brighter, cleaner, more surgical. 3 probable convoy routes lit up in gold across central Iran, paths no one else had flagged. They were narrow, erratic, and most damning of all, they avoided all known satellite overpasses. The room fell quiet. "Where did that come from?" asked Colonel Sharp, his tone no longer casual. Aria spoke for the first time. "These aren't speculative," she said calmly. "They're pulled from a triangulated frequency decay pattern logged by SIGINT arrays at Incirlik and Souda Bay. The Iranian network is masking mobile transmitters by piggybacking on their emergency broadcast channels. The signal shift suggests timed coordination between Esfahan and the Western Desert. If they're moving anything, it's through these 3 routes." Maddox narrowed his eyes. "And what? You figured that out in an hour?" "No," she replied. "I confirmed it in an hour. I've been watching this pattern for 8 months." A long beat. Colonel Sharp stepped forward, arms now uncrossed, his voice lower. "Where were you stationed before this assignment, Major?" "Most recently," she said. "Classified. Somewhere at the back of the room, someone cleared their throat uncomfortably." General Rains had entered unnoticed. He stood just behind the last row, arms behind his back, eyes fixed on the screen. After a moment, he stepped forward. "Update the mission briefing with Major Blake's projection," he ordered. "We adjust our infiltration corridors accordingly. And Captain Maddox, if you're uncomfortable flying this mission with intel you didn't generate yourself, you're welcome to step down." That shut the room up for good. Maddox said nothing. His jaw twitched. General Rains turned to Aria and gave a slight nod. "Good work, Major." As the room began to scatter, some murmuring, others glancing at her with new wariness, Aria quietly tapped her tablet off and slipped it back into its holster. It wasn't respect, not yet. But it was the first fracture in their doubt, and that's all she needed. The simulator room was cold by design, the fluorescent glow making every detail feel clinical and precise. In the observation bay above, General Rains stood with Colonel Sharp and a handful of senior advisors. Below, crews bustled into place, flight teams, data technicians, and mission analysts taking up their stations at the full-scale mock-up of the B-2 tactical coordination deck. Aria took her assigned seat behind the ELS monitoring array. It was positioned to the side of the central combat table, strategically close enough to observe everything, yet just far enough that she could be ignored without effort. On the main screen, a rendered topography of western Iran flickered to life, overlaid with mission corridors, convoy estimates, and projected satellite gaps. It was a carefully choreographed ballet of silence, stealth, and split-second timing. "Operation Sentinel Echo Mock Run 1, Colonel Sharp's voice came over the intercom. "Real-time replication using yesterday's intercept data. You'll fly your roles as assigned, no deviation unless prompted. Timer starts now." Captain Maddox led the scenario from the pilot command node, flanked by Delgado and 2 weapons officers. The tension was casual, confident. Aria watched the corridors unfold on her own screen. She traced signal decay rates across the southeastern quadrant, noting something odd. The shadows were wrong. Faint bursts of static, barely visible, rippled in near-synchronous pulses along an otherwise inactive corridor. She leaned forward, recalculated the decay spread, and overlaid known transmitter locations. Then she saw it. "Captain Maddox," she said evenly, requesting adjustment. "There's a signal nesting pattern forming in Quadrant Delta. That flank's not inactive. It's a decoy blind." Maddox didn't even glance her way. Appreciate the input, Major, but we're running the simulation on confirmed intel. Aria tried again, sharper this time. They're funneling your attention north. The real transfer vector is coming from the desert shelf southeast, beneath the radar-sat shadow. If this were a live run, we'd be ambushed from the blind side. Delgado chuckled. If this were a live run, we wouldn't be taking tips from someone who isn't in the air. Colonel Sharp's voice cut in overhead. Continue as planned. Let's see how the current strategy holds. Aria sat back slowly, eyes narrowing. She said nothing more. The simulation progressed. The teams launched digital payloads toward the northern convoys. On screen, 2 red icons blinked, confirmed neutralization. A pause of success hung in the air until the entire left flank of the mission board lit up in crimson. Enemy signals, dozens of them, flooded in from the exact coordinates Aria had flagged. Drone swarms, electronic jammers, convoy diversions. Then, mission failed blinked in white against a black background. Target lost. Defenses breached. Strategic failure. Maddox cursed under his breath, slamming his palm against the edge of the console. That's not possible. That corridor was cold. No, Aria said quietly, but clearly it was quiet. That's not the same. All eyes turned to her, the cold hum of the room swallowing the silence. Delgado opened his mouth, but shut it just as quickly. Across the upper gallery, General Rains stepped forward, hands behind his back. "Replay the last 7 minutes," he ordered. The screen jumped back, revealing the timing of the strike, decoys activated in perfect sync with B-2 flyover patterns, leading the simulated payloads into dead zones. Meanwhile, the real convoys shifted with pinpoint precision through the gaps, bypassing detection entirely. It was not just a simulation failure, it was a tactical humiliation. Colonel Sharp didn't hide his frustration. Who designed the corridor targeting sequence? Me, Maddox muttered. And you ignored Major Blake's observation? I followed our pre-approved targeting model. Sharp turned to Rains. That model hasn't been updated in 3 weeks. Rains didn't say anything. Instead, he looked directly at Aria. Major, how did you spot it? She didn't blink. The signal decay from the edge transmitters wasn't consistent with passive relay stations. The anomalies occurred in patterns too uniform for terrain bounce. That level of discipline only happens with precision-jammed cover for active movement. Maddox scowled. So you're saying they baited us? Yes, she said, and we bit. Rains nodded slowly, his face unreadable. Scrap the current model. Major Blake, submit a revised corridor map based on your analysis. I want it in the new sim run by 1800. Maddox opened his mouth to protest, but Rains cut him off with a look. That'll be all. As the room began to clear, Maddox passed by Aria without speaking, but she caught the way his jaw clenched. The confidence had cracked, and under it, something closer to fear was starting to show. She didn't take pride in it. She just took note. Night fell over Al Udeid in a blanket of silence that was more ominous than calm. The temperature dropped sharply, and the air outside hung heavy with desert dust and jet fuel. In the control hub, the lighting dimmed to red ops mode, and most of the day's personnel filtered out into their quarters or midnight chow. Aria didn't leave. A routine systems integrity check, they called it. She'd been assigned to inspect the secondary uplink relay nodes on the far west side of the base, an unusual task considering it was typically handled by junior techs. When she asked why, the duty officer only shrugged. Colonel Sharp's orders said your clearance makes you the best fit. The phrasing was off. Still, she took her toolkit, double-checked her tablet logs, and headed across the runway access zone under escort from 2 base personnel she didn't recognize. They wore proper uniforms, badges aligned, but didn't introduce themselves. Their silence said enough. The comms relay room was a squat, reinforced structure near the outer fuel depots. Aria keyed in her code, the door locking behind her with a final metallic hiss. She waited. No one followed her inside. Good. The space inside was tight, servers along both walls, low hum from the cooling fans, a faint scent of ozone. She moved like she belonged there, hands steady, mind sharp. She began checking relay integrity and system pings. The first 2 nodes checked out, the third didn't. Packet logs were inconsistent. There was a 6-second delay in signal transfer from the relay to the encryption junction, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. That kind of delay wasn't just signal drift, it meant interference. She drilled deeper. The signal passed through a masked protocol, one not listed in the operations topology. Someone had hard-coded an alternate routing sequence. It was subtle, brilliant even. But it didn't belong. She opened the back end of the code and froze. The masking signature was NATO standard, but the compiler notes were tagged in a language code not used by any of the coalition nations, Farsi. Aria's breath slowed. Her mind moved faster. This wasn't just a bug, this was embedded infiltration. Someone was redirecting information through an unregistered subnode on the base, possibly relaying to an external party, and that subnode had just activated during the simulation window hours earlier, which meant someone had access to the real-time mission model. She unplugged the primary link and began a manual trace, bypassing the official diagnostic system entirely. Her fingers moved rapidly over the console, isolating the rogue process line by line. Whoever had written the code had taken care to mimic standard data flow, but not quite enough. Beneath the camouflage, the transfer patterns weren't automated, they were curated. Someone had been watching the OpsNet in real time. Not from Tehran, from inside Al-Udaid. She was halfway through triangulating the internal IP handoff when the outer security lights blinked. A faint metallic clank echoed from outside the comms room, something soft, intentional. Aria reached into her vest and pulled the signal beacon from her breast pocket. It was a decoy at first glance, but she flipped the casing and activated a narrowband pulse, encrypted alert, directed straight to base command. Then she shut down the lights, silencing the room. For 30 seconds, nothing moved. A knock. Major Blake? The voice outside wasn't familiar. Male, casual, too casual. Just wanted to make sure everything's okay in there. Protocol says you check in every 15 minutes. She stayed silent. That wasn't protocol. She hadn't been assigned a comms check window at all. Another knock. This one firmer. We can come in if you need help. Just say the word. Her eyes flicked to the secondary console. The access log flashed a new entry. Override request. Authorization pending. They were trying to force the door. She typed 3 lines into the manual override shell, rerouting the signal clone she'd isolated earlier to a secure partition for analysis. Then she extracted the node and slipped it into the side pocket of her belt. With a final command, she initiated a timed system reset. The rogue access trail would be wiped in 60 seconds. It was enough. A louder bang hit the door, not from a keypad but a boot. She slipped through the rear service hatch, locking it from the inside, and vanished into the shadows between fuel towers, moving quickly and without sound. Her feet found gravel, then steel grates, and finally asphalt. She didn't head back toward operations. That would be the first place they'd check. Instead, she turned toward the remote recon hangar, one of the few places on base with a direct uplink to off-grid decryption arrays. She had no intention of submitting this report through standard channels, not yet, because someone on base wasn't just leaking mission data. They were working with the target, and whoever they were, they knew she'd seen it. By the time Aria reached the recon hangar, the base had already shifted into a low-level alert status. She spotted 2 patrol units rerouted toward the southern fuel perimeter, too far to be coincidence. Someone was moving pieces, distracting eyes, pulling attention elsewhere. Inside the recon terminal, the lights flickered once before stabilizing. It was unstaffed at this hour, and Aria took advantage of that. She inserted the cloned node into the uplink console and ran a silent scan. No beacon, no metadata. The results came back fast. 3 separate data transfer points had been rerouted in the past 48 hours. One embedded within a training protocol upload, another during the B-2 flight simulator diagnostic. The third, most damning, was active during the failed simulation Aria had tried to warn them about. They'd used the drill as cover to test their blind spot. It had worked. She compiled a rapid report summary, encrypted it, and tagged it for eyes-only review by General Rains, bypassing every mid-tier command node. It wasn't standard procedure, but standard procedures had already failed. She was halfway back to her quarters when they stopped her. 2 MPs flanked her from the side corridor, firm but not aggressive. "Major Blake," one said, "you've been requested at security review." Colonel Sharp's office. "Requested" was polite. Inside the dim-lit conference room, the mood was colder than the air. Colonel Sharp stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Lieutenant Vega sat off to the side, eyes sharp behind the glare of his glasses. A terminal waited on the desk, locked but active. Sharp didn't waste time. "Then we've received an anomaly report tied to last night's comms check. Your name's on the access log. Want to explain what you were doing out near Relay 9 at 200 hours? Aria remained still. "Sinai was executing a systems integrity check, assigned by the operations desk, not according to the log. That task was never entered into the mission schedule, and there's no record of any authorizing officer." Vega leaned forward. "We're not accusing you of anything yet, but unauthorized access during a live operation window is a serious breach." Aria said nothing, not because she had nothing to say, but because the room wasn't safe. Sharp gestured toward the locked terminal. "Your report was flagged by our internal filters. Triple encrypted. You bypassed chain of command review. That doesn't instill confidence. I sent it directly to General Rains," she said evenly. Sharp raised an eyebrow. "That's exactly what concerns me." Vega tapped a few keys on the console, the screen flashing with Aria's encrypted report, still unreadable to them, protected by authorization barriers even base security couldn't override. "You embedded a dynamic encryption key," Vega said, voice neutral but clipped. "It pings back to an NSA subchannel, not the Air Force chain." "Why?" "Because what I found doesn't belong in a spreadsheet or a committee folder," Aria replied. "And because someone in this building already knows what I saw and tried to stop me." Sharp's mouth tensed. "Those are serious accusations. They're not accusations, they're facts." He paced slowly, then turned. "You're operating without oversight, running independent diagnostics, inserting hardware into closed systems. I don't care what your clearance level is. This behavior triggers containment protocol." Vega's tone dropped. "We're placing you on temporary duty hold. Your access to tactical nodes is suspended, and you'll be restricted to your quarters unless otherwise escorted." Aria didn't argue. She stood, nodded once, and allowed the MPs outside to escort her. But as she stepped into the corridor, she noticed Vega watching her, not with suspicion now, but something more calculating, as if he couldn't decide whether she was the threat or the only one who'd seen it coming. Back in her room, the tablet she had left charging now displayed a simple system prompt. "File received. Priority acknowledged." General Rains had opened the message. The lock on her door clicked shut behind her, the MP's station just beyond it. She sat on the edge of the bed, eyes fixed not on the screen, but on the empty chair across from her. They thought containment would slow her down. They didn't realize she had just started moving. General Marcus Raines stared at the blinking cursor on the screen. The encryption on Aria Blake's report was unlike anything he'd encountered from within his own command. Not just layered, it was disciplined. Every sequence, every verification key was wrapped in protocols that screamed one thing: top-tier intelligence-grade clearance. And someone had bypassed the usual filter to ensure it landed in his queue alone. He paused before entering his override code. Even with 4 decades of classified access, the system prompted him twice. The final gateway required biometric and vocal confirmation, an NSA-level clearance layer. When the file opened, Raines leaned back in his chair. Lines of code scrolled past first: network pings, subnode traces, embedded anomalies. He followed the logic trail, jaw tightening as he realized what Aria had discovered. Not just a breach in the simulation data, but a deliberate reroute of core command architecture during a live intelligence transfer. Whoever had done it had used coalition system protocols, but embedded covert markers, some in Farsi, others in disguised NATO substructure. It wasn't a leak, it was a tactical compromise, and the only person who had seen it clearly was someone he'd been told was a mid-level signal analyst with a paper-thin flight dossier. Raines tapped into the personnel record interface. He typed in Major Aria Blake and pulled up the active duty file. Her background was concise, almost too concise. Assignments to strategic comm centers, temporary tours with recon analysis units, and a recent role as mission systems advisor on a joint operation in Eastern Europe. The awards section was clean, impressive, but surface level. He frowned and entered his general's override. Another screen, another wall. Access restricted, Command Authority Tier Alpha 4 required. Raines hesitated. There were only 3 people on base with that kind of access, and 2 of them were standing in the next building, running flight simulations. He entered his Tier Alpha code, signed with the unique encryption signature of the CENTCOM command node. The screen didn't flash red, it didn't blink, it shifted, and everything changed. The file expanded. A dozen previously redacted assignments filled the screen. Operation High Lantern, Lead Extraction Specialist, Ghost Falcon Directive, Field Commander, JTF Omega-12 Classified Unit Deployment Result Mission Success, 3 confirmed asset recoveries. Raines's breath slowed. There were commendations. Hidden citations co-signed by multiple commands, including one marked simply Award Recommendation, Medal of Honor Confidential pending redaction review. She had led at least 4 missions that never appeared in public logs, each one deeper than the last, tucked beneath layers of misdirection and official silence. The final line chilled him. Clearance Sapphire 0, operative status embedded. Command autonomy activated. Raines sat back, eyes narrowing. Sapphire 0 was not an Air Force designation. It was a classification used for interagency operatives operating across multiple commands with full tactical autonomy, the kind of personnel who didn't report up because their very presence was classified above the branches they worked under. He looked up from the screen. Someone had planted this woman in his B-2 squadron and hadn't told him why, but she had just uncovered a breach in the heart of their operation. And if her instincts were as sharp as her record suggested, she hadn't come here by chance. She'd come because someone expected this to happen and trusted only her to stop it. General Raines didn't call for an aide. He didn't summon a committee. He closed the file and walked, fast and silent, across the darkened corridor toward the secure detainment wing. The MPs on duty straightened at the sight of him, saluting without hesitation. "I need to speak with Major Blake," he said, alone. They hesitated only a second before stepping aside. Inside the small quarters, Aria sat at the edge of her bunk, still in uniform, posture straight as steel. The only light came from a tablet on the desk beside her, its screen dimmed but active. She didn't rise when the door opened. She just looked at him, her face unreadable. Rains shut the door behind him, no guards, no protocol. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, quietly, "You should have come to me directly." "And did," she said, "and just not through channels already compromised." He exhaled. It wasn't anger, it was acknowledgement. "I opened your file," he said. Her expression didn't change. "Then you understand why I didn't start this assignment with a handshake." He nodded once. "Sapphire Zero, you've been embedded since before most of my team even knew what this mission would entail." "I was assigned months ago," Aria said. "We flagged the pattern of interference during an operation in Istanbul. The breach signatures matched what I found here. Only this time, they were hiding inside a US command structure. So you volunteered for the B-2 unit." "I requested it," she corrected, "because whoever we're hunting knows our systems, our procedures. They're not just selling tech to Iran, they're rewriting the way we operate from the inside out." Rains moved to the desk and leaned on it, arms folded. "You think there's an embedded asset in this unit?" "I know there is," she said. "And they've already compromised at least one corridor of our Sentinel Echo strike plan." He rubbed his temples, processing it all. "This goes higher than command protocol. We're less than 48 hours out from launch. You're saying someone inside this base is about to hand Iran our targeting architecture in real time?" "Yes," she said, "and I believe they're connected to the operative known as Vulture." Rains looked up sharply. "Vulture's been off-grid for over a year." "Not anymore," she said. "I intercepted his signature, buried under a shell relay mimicking joint tactical pings. He's not just feeding intel, he's orchestrating where we fail." "Silence." Then Rain straightened, his voice clipped. "Decisive. Effective immediately. I'm placing you in operational command of Sentinel Echo's internal security protocols and threat vector response. You'll report directly to me. No one else. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "I want you at tomorrow's final pre-to-op briefing, front and center. I want them to see you, hear you, and I want their excuses out of the way before this mission lifts off." Aria stood slowly. "If I'm right, they won't just be surprised, they'll be exposed." Rains held her gaze. "Good," he said. "Then let's expose them." He turned for the door, pausing only once. "And Major," she raised an eyebrow. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." She allowed herself the faintest hint of a smile. "You weren't meant to." The final pre-op briefing took place in the Central Operations Dome, a circular war room buried beneath reinforced concrete, its ceiling layered with noise-cancelling mesh and Faraday shielding. The room was packed. Every officer, technician and mission crew member involved in Operation Sentinel Echo was present. The countdown to deployment had begun, and the air was saturated with the unspoken pressure of everything that could go wrong. General Rains entered first, flanked by Colonel Sharp and Lieutenant Vega. But all eyes went to the woman who walked in behind them, Major Aria Blake in full-duty uniform, her posture precise, her face composed, stepped through the door and didn't take her usual place at the periphery. Instead, she walked to the center of the briefing floor, past Maddox, past Delgado, past the men who had laughed just days before, and stood beside the main tactical display. No one said a word. Rains broke the silence. "Before we proceed with final target confirmations, Major Blake has a few insights to share. Insights the success of this mission now depends on. You will listen." He stepped back. Aria tapped her tablet, and the 3D projection lit up with a sequence of convoy movements across western Iran. "These are the 3 primary corridors identified by intelligence," she said. "Convoys disguised as humanitarian aid, timed with religious festivals and radio silence periods. Each one is shielded by mobile radar jammers calibrated to mimic environmental noise. She paused. But these are the decoys. She tapped again. 3 new corridors appeared, thin, curved, erratic, but timed to match the known gaps in satellite coverage. Only one of these paths matches a signal pattern I've tracked across 4 previous operations. That signature belongs to a known rogue asset, Elias Brandt, former JSOC analyst, codename Vulture. Maddox stirred. I thought Vulture was disavowed, blacklisted years ago. He was, Aria said, until last week when his signal reappeared, piggybacked on our own training relay, hidden inside simulation echo data. Colonel Sharp narrowed his eyes, meaning he's watching us? Not just watching, Aria said, manipulating. He's been feeding false corridor data through a ghost relay inside our comms net, forcing us to ignore the real threat vector.
And we've been running simulations off his feed?
Vega asked, voice tight. Aria nodded. I found the breach 3 nights ago, but the relay could only exist with one condition. Someone here on this base had to install the seed protocol directly into the ops network. Now the room went completely silent. She turned slowly, and I've narrowed it down to one person. A pause. Then Aria looked directly at Captain Sean Maddox. You. Maddox blinked once. The room shifted like a fault line had cracked beneath the floor. What the hell are you talking about? He said, voice half laughing, half threatening. You think I'm leaking targeting data to Iran? I think you've been feeding data to Elias Brandt, she said, voice flat. And I think you didn't even realize who you were working for at first, but by the time you figured it out, you were in too deep. You're insane. 3 weeks ago, during the routing update on B-2 Echo 2, you were the one who pushed through the new synchronization script. It created a passive access port buried in the mission recorder, one that wasn't registered with our diagnostics. She stepped forward. Last week, you were the only one with physical access to the backup server that went offline right before the failed simulation. Maddox took a step back. Aria didn't. Then, 2 nights ago, you filed a system repair ticket for a relay node that never reported an error. The same relay node where I found Brandt's signal signature. Maddox's jaw clenched. This is a witch hunt. No, she said. This is treason. Before he could move, Vega and 2 MPs stepped forward from the side of the room, weapons low but ready. The war room was dead quiet, and the only sound was Maddox's breathing, suddenly louder than everything else. Maddox raised his hands slowly, his mouth parted, 100 justifications fighting to be said, but none dared step into the silence. You think I planned this? He snapped, voice cracking under the weight of the room pressing in on him. You think I wanted any of this? Aria didn't blink. Then why did you do it? Maddox's eyes darted around the room, landing on no one in particular. Then his shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in something colder. Resignation. I didn't know it was him at first, he muttered. The contact came through secure intel circles, seemed legit. They said it was about reform, about preventing another botched intervention like Kandahar. He glanced at Sharp, at Rains. You think we haven't all seen it? The system's broken. We fly missions no one admits exist, lose people we're not allowed to mourn, clean up messes someone else made, and then get scapegoated when it blows up. Aria didn't respond. Maddox's voice grew sharper. I didn't leak targeting data. I passed theoretical corridor layouts. They said it was for red team testing, our own side. I thought I was making the system safer, until Vulture contacted you directly, she said quietly. That stopped him. For a moment he looked almost impressed. Then he nodded, slowly. Yeah, he said. When he revealed himself, I should have backed out. But it was too late. He had everything. My flight logs, my comms records. Hell, he even had my father's service file. The mention of his father pulled a quiet ripple through the room. My dad flew B-52 seconds, died on a mission that got buried under training mishap paperwork. No medal, no funeral, just a folded flag and a whisper that it never happened. He turned toward Aria, something harder now in his voice. You know what it's like to be erased. That's what they do to people like us, so don't talk to me about loyalty. Don't act like you're clean. And that's when she said it. I was the one who pulled your father out of that wreckage. The room held its breath. Maddox froze. I was part of Ghost Falcon's cleanup team, Aria said, steady. I dragged him out from under a flaming wing in Kandahar province. We got him to the evac point. He coded in the air. I performed CPR for 9 minutes before he stabilized. She took a step closer. I wrote the after-action report they buried. I fought to get him recognized. The system failed him, not me. Maddox's mouth opened, but nothing came out. His hands dropped to his sides. You joined the Air Force because of him, she said, softer now. But somewhere along the way, you started believing that taking it down would bring him justice. And you? He rasped. What are you even doing here? Aria looked around the room. I'm here to make sure no one else gets buried in silence. General Rains stepped forward then, his voice low and firm. Captain Sean Maddox, you're under investigation for unauthorized access, willful intelligence compromise, and indirect collaboration with a known hostile entity. You will be remanded to secure custody until further review. The MPs moved in. Maddox didn't resist. His eyes never left Arias as they took him. When the door shut behind them, the war room remained hushed. Colonel Sharp turned to Aria, his voice rough. You knew all of this, and let him walk around free? I needed to be sure, she said. You don't expose a leak by sealing the pipe. You expose it by letting it drip. Lieutenant Vega let out a slow breath. So what now? Aria turned back to the projection screen. The red corridors had faded. Only the true one remained, traced in her hand, verified by instinct and experience that couldn't be faked. Now, she said, we take the real shot. Dawn broke in spectral silence over the tarmac at Al Udeid. The desert wind had stilled, and the runway shimmered under amber light as if holding its breath for what was to come. Inside Hangar Delta, the B-2 Spirit sat like a sleeping predator, matte black, angular, waiting. The crews moved with quiet urgency, clipped words passed between flight engineers and mission specialists. In the center of it all stood Major Aria Blake, now in full combat ops gear, her name newly stitched into the flight patch that hadn't been touched since her arrival. She stood beside Lieutenant Maya Chen, who had been assigned to Aria's tactical coordination team at her own request. The younger woman's eyes flicked between her screen and Aria with a new kind of energy. Somewhere between focus and admiration. Strike window holds at 0332 Zulu, Chen said. Convoy is confirmed active and mobile. Decoy signals have gone cold. This is the real move. Aria nodded. Launch readiness? Green across all nodes. All squadrons are locked on vector and holding comm blackout. B-2 Echo 1 is armed, pilots on board. Aria turned toward the center of the hangar where General Rains stood with Colonel Sharp and the final tactical team. He watched her approach with a tight nod. Not formal, not ceremonial, just mutual trust. Last chance to pull the plug, Major, Rains said. Aria looked up at the monitor feed. Satellite overlays of Esfahan's outskirts, convoy lights barely distinguishable beneath masking layers of electromagnetic fog. No, she said, we end it here. He studied her for a long moment. It's your operation now. Colonel Sharp offered her a tablet with final codes. Mission authority has been transferred. Aria took it, thumbed the seal, and watched as the digital clock on the operation screen began its final descent. 014:59 upstairs in the operations booth. Vega monitored internal comms traffic. No breaches, no anomalous pings. Whoever was listening isn't anymore. Aria walked toward the B-2, every step steady. As she approached the access ladder, Captain Delgado emerged from the shadow of the aircraft, helmet in hand. Major? he said, almost sheepish. She raised an eyebrow. He cleared his throat. I was wrong about you. Her voice was quiet. You were just early. Everyone sees it eventually. He gave a half smile. Permission to fly under your lead? She held out her hand. Granted. He shook it. 01120. Aria climbed into the co-pilot station of Echo 1, the cockpit sealing around her with a hiss of pressure. The world narrowed. Everything outside became background noise. Only the mission remained. Chen's voice came through her headset. All assets in position. Live feed confirms convoy approaching final intercept zone. Copy, Aria said. Executing vector adjustment, with a few taps, she nudged the digital corridor tighter, more surgical. It was a move based not just on satellite data, but memory, pattern recognition, the nuance of deception that no AI could decode, but instinct could. Outside, the B-2 engines whirred to life, quiet thunder echoing into the desert. One by one, other aircraft followed, peeling into the morning sky like shadows splitting from the earth. Aria looked forward. No more simulations, no more warnings. This time, it was real. The B-2 cut through the sky like a phantom, silent, high, unseen. At 40,000 feet, the curvature of the earth was visible, and the horizon shimmered with a darkness deeper than night. Inside the cockpit, everything pulsed with precision. There was no chatter, only data, movement, breath. Aria watched the targeting overlays shift as the convoy below entered the designated strike corridor. They were smart, she had to admit, changing routes last minute, masking the signature with ambient heat signatures from nearby industrial generators, but not smart enough. Chen's voice came through the comms, hushed but steady, confirming visual from Echo 3. Convoy has split into two. Aria didn't hesitate. Echo 2, flank north and shadow second column. Delay your strike by 10 seconds. Echo 1 and Echo 3 will hit primary convoy on mark. The pilots confirmed and the final sync engaged. 00114 from her console. Aria monitored the jamming resistance output spike. Expected. The convoy had been equipped with a last-ditch burst jammer, but she had accounted for it. Override counterjam in 3, 2, execute. The signal burst fizzled, their convoy's cloak vanishing like a fog peeled back by light. 027, the reticle turned red. She gave the order. Release. 3 precision-guided bunker busters dropped from the underbelly of the B-2S, slicing through the upper atmosphere in perfect formation. The screens displayed impact projections, thermal echo signatures, and structural ruptures in real time. A heartbeat. Then impact. The feed lit up with a chain reaction. Vehicles igniting, infrared signatures flaring, personnel scrambling. No civilians, no collateral, only silence. Confirmed. Rain's voice broke through, deep and even. All assets confirm. Target eliminated. Operation Sentinel Echo complete. The cockpit remained still. Then Aria closed her eyes and breathed, for the first time in days, maybe weeks. As they returned to base, the B-2 seconds descending one by one under the rising sun, the base buzzed with quiet awe. No speeches, no cheers, just reverence. After the debrief, as teams were dismissed and mission tapes encrypted for high-level review, General Rains found her again. This time, he didn't speak in orders. You didn't just save the mission, he said. You saved the people who didn't know they were already losing. Aria nodded once. That's what I was trained for. He studied her. What now? She looked toward the horizon beyond the hangars. I disappear, she said. You're owed a medal. I don't need a medal. I need a clean exit. He hesitated. You'll get both. The next morning, her quarters were empty. Her name cleared from rosters. Her flight record sealed. The only sign she had ever been there was a single handwritten schematic left on the tactical planning table. It wasn't signed, But every officer who looked at it understood it wasn't just a map, it was a warning and a blueprint for how to fight a war no one was supposed to see. Somewhere far beyond the wire, where shadows met silence, Major Aria Blake walked alone, with her name forgotten, her mission complete, and the sky once more watching her from above. Not as a ghost, but as the only one who saw it all coming. And maybe that's what true duty looks like. Not medals or headlines, not even a name etched in stone, but the quiet certainty that you showed up when no one else saw the storm coming and stood your ground anyway. If Aria's story moved you, left you questioning, or simply reminded you of the unseen heroes in our world, then you are exactly who we create these stories for. Thank you for watching. If you haven't yet, consider subscribing to the channel for more stories like this, where justice doesn't always wear a uniform, but always shows up when it matters most. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in Aria's place? Scroll down and let us know in the comments. And don't go just yet. There are more powerful stories waiting for you right here on the screen. Click one to keep watching. You won't regret it. Until next time, stay sharp, stay true,